I started advocating while I was in the inside. Georgia Department of Correction, where I served time, they had a dormitory prior to me coming there through their system where they designated for people living with HIV. And people that were in that dormitory were marginalized, pushed into a setting because they thought that people living with HIV shouldn't be with the general population. And people were being harassed, people were being mistreated by officers. And I had to do a lot of the writing to the Department of Care and Treatment, the Deputy of Care and Treatment, and the medical department to make sure that these trans women were getting access to the medication that they needed. A lot of the trans women happened to have been women that were going through ICE, and a lot of these women didn't speak English. And I spoke broken Spanish, and I just saw that people were not getting adequate care. It was a trans woman, a Mexican trans woman, and she was about to be deported. But the whole time she was there, she never received her medication for her living with HIV. And we had to write letters in her support. And basically we had to organize together and bond together in order to just not just around issues around HIV, just general conditions of confinement and how we were being treated on the inside. I went through multiple cycles of incarceration. I've probably been to over 10 different jails and prisons. And from 17 to 25, 24 or 25, I stayed in a cycle of incarceration. And once I was released, the final time they taught me how to, at the facility I went to, the Atlanta Transitional Center. It's a place that gets you ready for like gaining employment, building resumes. And once I was able to gain those skills, I was able to gain employment. And after I was able to gain employment, I wanted more for myself. I wanted to advocate in a way, like I got into law, pre-law, and while I was in there, I filed a lawsuit against the Georgia Department of Correction I was sexually assaulted while I was incarcerated, and they failed to protect me. I fought this system while I was inside, and then I fell in love with law. I realized that this is a tool to combat oppression, to combat marginalization. And I wanted to expand on that once I was released. And that's when I started studying pre-law. And right now I'm in my last semester, and I'm studying for the LSAT, and I plan to attend law school once I'm done. 2014 was the year that I was released from incarceration. And what I realized is that I had been through a cycle of incarceration most of my teen and early adulthood life. And I never received services. I never received help. I never received anything. I was just let out, released, and kept into a cycle of incarceration. And I wanted to break that cycle for other people. Transcending barriers was really originated from wanting to provide support to individuals, trans GNC individuals who were being released from incarceration. Those reentry services, those essential needs that a person have around housing, around clothing and hygiene support, just to feel love. Knew that was very important. And a lot of people that were getting out were living with HIV and needed access to those services. So we were just connecting people around. At that time, we were connecting people to resources that exist. But as we learned over time, it wasn't enough, that people needed more. And that's when we started doing work around sexual health. When a trans woman is getting out of prison, a trans woman not only having to deal with being female in society, also being trans in society, and those intersections work within each other when it comes to pervasive discrimination. It makes it more difficult for you to gain access to employment, gain access to housing assistance, gain access to HIV prevention and HIV care if you're living with HIV. It's just all of those things combined, working amongst each other, just makes it that much difficult for you to rebuild your life. I think that being able to pass has helped me in some ways, but also I still have those other, being a Black trans woman, being a formerly incarcerated trans woman. When your document doesn't reflect who you are presenting yourself as, That's an added barrier. Passing help you navigate society without people knowing your identity. Once you go into a workforce, once you go into trying to gain access to housing, that's when you have to provide government issued identification. And if you don't have those, the government identification that matches who you are presenting yourself as, that changes for you. Growing up, being a younger transgender woman, in my teens and early 20s, it was difficult because I dealt with a lot of men not treating me how I knew I should have been treated, and a lot of time that pushed me in situations, and so many other trans women put us in situations where we settled for less than what we deserve. If a man tells you that he loves you but he wants to take it to the next step when he wants to have unprotected sex, you feel an obligation to do it because you want to maintain that relationship. You want to maintain that love because the general society is not showing you love. So this is the person that's showing you love. So you'll do anything to keep that. And that's what I felt often at times when guys would want to have sex without using protection. It leads you into that situation like, I don't want to displease him. I want to keep him happy because he keeps me happy. He shows me love. And if I do something that he doesn't like, maybe he'll leave me. We don't need people to speak on our experience. We have mouths, we can speak ourselves. And advocating for ourselves is so important because it's our experience. We know how to combat these systems because we've lived it. We know what these systems have done to us because we've lived it. And whilst we have our fierce advocates and activists that exist today, we can't do it alone. We need the help of allies. We need the help of our government. We need the help of many people to push us along so we can get out of this deep hole that we've been in for so long. I am hopeful that it will happen at some point, but I think the sooner the better.